Hello, everyone. Kind of roll off the cuff on this one and just shoot the shit, really. We didn't really have much of a plan going into this, and I just thought it'd be fun to press play and see where it goes.
It's funny that that's the language you use, Nick. So
Shoot the
violent.
shit.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
I,
vulgar.
I found the war in your consciousness.
There it is.
Hmm.
There. Shooting the shit.
How did that come about?
I have no idea. It was probably like two construction workers like around a construction site that we're talking. I have no idea. But it's a funny terminology. I think that's like why I use it, just because it's funny.
It is funny. I have no idea why. I never thought of that before.
Where does that come from?
I'm gonna have to
I,
look that
I
up
I'm gonna guess
after.
somewhere in New York City. I'm thinking New Yorkers are responsible for that one.
I may take offense to that.
You should.
I shall represent the East Coast. Although I don't
You
know if
said
I'm.
that in like the least New Yorker accent ever.
I probably can do a New York accent if you
It's
wanted
in
me
there
to.
somewhere.
I'll go put on my sneakers.
Yeah, you're gonna go to Walmart's next?
No, certainly
No,
not.
no Kmart's for you.
No, the Kmart by our house closed down. Kmart's is way too depressing for me.
Yeah, Kmart's was a depressing kind of store at the end
Yeah,
there.
yeah. One time I must have been so depressed that, and this is right after I had Lucas, so I was depressed, and I was going to Kmart, and I'm like, yes, this is like the first time that I've gone out in, I mean, I don't know at that point how long it had been, probably a few weeks. And I was going to Kmart. I was like, oh God, there's definitely something wrong here if I'm excited to go to Kmart.
Ugh.
But anyway, why
You didn't
don't
say it
you
in your New York
share
accent with the S.
Kmart's? Well, an accent means S.
I thought that's like how like New Yorkers and people from sort of like the northeastern region say it. It's
I don't
like
know. Aren't you
you
from the
add the S.
Northeast?
I am from the Northeast, so I'm saying this. Like I've like, definitely a lot of family members have called Walmart Walmarts plural.
I don't think I have a family that does that, but what I do know is that people in the past have commented that my mom says
Use.
use.
It's a good one.
And she does have an accent as well, I think. She's originally
My
from
volume went all the way down. Sorry.
Queens, New York. Most people, the thing I get the most is when I tell people where I'm from. I say I'm from Long Island, and everyone says, "Oh, you're from Long Island?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's what I just said, but that's not how I said it." I think that's the most common response.
Yeah, accents are a very interesting phenomena. I'm sure I have one. I don't even notice it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you notice your own accent.
Good question. So the white sage smudge spray, buy it on
I love
Young You
mine.
Organics.
I
I love
love
mine too.
mine.
It's a nice break from whatever you're doing to do something else really briefly and give yourself something a little pleasant, maybe shift your consciousness a little bit, shift your mood just a little bit.
Yeah, small shifts create big changes.
Yeah, it's all about those tiny little small shifts. Mm,
Little by
Little,
little.
little by little shifts are shifts. So yeah,
Just
you
don't
could get
shoot the shit
yeah, just don't shoot the shit
or the shift. Whatever.
or the shift. Yeah, you don't want it to splatter.
Ugh,
Don't
definitely
waste your
not.
bullets. Yeah, you get this at younguorganics.com. Vika's gonna love that we're talking about shooting the shit while advertising her product. But
Mm,
you're welcome, Vika. Sorry about that. You can use this to, clear the energy out of the room and create a sanctuary for all spirits. And yeah, just a really pleasant spray. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10. Got
I like
anything
that
else
you
you'd like
could
to add?
use it for mental clarity. I think that's important. There's so many thoughts going on in the brain that are just not true and unconscious. So I personally think mental clarity is something important to work on.
I really definitely resonate with that. And I would like to add too, when using it for mental clarity, you can call upon the spirits of the spray, which are the plant spirits themselves, the spirit of the white sage and the clary sage and the rosemary and the lemongrass and the palo santo to help you have a more clear state of mind
Mm,
and to create a clear space for you. And I mean, that was
okay.
just a little invocation that I wanted to share. And you all could use it
I'm
for
gonna do
watching.
that. I'm gonna do that. I've just been commanding God to do my brain reprogramming, but I'm gonna do that as well.
Commanding
How
God to
long is
do
it
the
gonna
brain
take?
reprogramming.
Yeah. Reorient my brain to positive thinking, supportive thinking, solution-based thinking.
I've been thinking a lot about the interconnectedness with me and God and how that I was taught that I'm something separate from God and how
Yeah.
God was this sort of just like judgmental being in the
Yeah.
sky, just judging people, judging God judging God's own creation, like really hating its own
Yeah.
creation. And you know, anymore, I don't exactly see it like that. And I've been really thinking a lot about how just we can have interpersonal relationship with God to, where we're pleading with God to help us. And we're also too embodying our own divine spark and helping ourselves. And it's just like this kind of like flowing type of relationship where, you ask that out and start receiving it in and then start doing the things or not, maybe not even in a state of doing. Sometimes it could just be just a state of relaxing, giving yourself a break. I noticed for me that's something that has been coming up is learning how to just give myself a break both physically and mentally.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I would like to say something that I've learned recently is that it's not, I don't want to say it's not supposed to be pleading, but you said you're pleading with God. Because I did that recently. It's like, just please show me what to do. And Hamilton reoriented me. It's commanding. Like I have the ability to direct, and it's not so much of a please do this. It's like, no, we are doing this together. And that's
Yeah,
how it's done. So I have taken more of a commanding approach.
I like to think about what we're talking about in this instance, and there's no separation from it, but just a new word, another word of commanding spirit to be able to help you, or commanding spirit to help you do X, Y, and Z. Even though it's the same thing we're talking about. God is, spirit is, and what we're talking about is something that I've been thinking too a lot about lately is just encoding spirit to be supportive of your overall well-being, of my overall well-being, of
Yeah.
everyone's overall well-being, and embodying that.
Yeah. All the spirits that serve my highest self, just come on in. You're
Yeah,
all welcome to support
spirits
me.
that serve the highest self that help me.
Yeah. Like, just like, guide me. Let's do this.
Let's do this.
Yeah. I had the same idea of separation between me and God for a very, well, most of my life.
Same
uh,
here.
until about, 15 years ago or so. Uh, and then even at that time, my relationship was still not a very personal one with God. It was still like, I think there were still some underlying things that had to, be straightened out, whatever, fix, whatever you want to call it, reoriented to the fact that I don't need to act a certain way or perform a certain way to have a relationship with God. Like, it is just a fact that God is in through and all around, and I could have the relationship that I choose. And just like any relationship, I mean, you work at it, you develop, it develops over time. You don't just go up to a stranger on the street and like hug it out. But I think you could probably do that with God anyway. But point being, I mean, it's a relationship. But yeah, I had that idea of separation and of judgment, and I think from what I understand, I feel that the church, the Catholic Church, decided to go that way. They decided to teach us that God had to forgive us for our sins, rather than God never has to forgive because the only thing God does is love and create. I mean, I used that the other day. I really like fucked up with Lucas the other morning. So I was just like, all right, God still loves me no matter what. Thank God. Like, they used
God
to
still loves
teach
you.
people that because they wanted them to come back to the church to get forgiven. I mean, I think this is in like the 13th century or so.
Yeah, and then it was also too like, oh, you sinned? Well, hey, pay us. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this on here, how I said I don't think that forgiveness is necessary. And I kind of I've been walking that back a little bit and understanding it in a different understanding. I don't or a different way, right? Like, I don't know if we have to be forgiven from God, but maybe it is a useful tool for humans. But also too, I think it is more than just forgiveness, right? It is an understanding, it is a compassion, it is an embracing, it is a, you know, letting something go.
Yeah, I think it's twofold, at least the way I see it. And maybe it's more than that. But with the forgiveness, part of it is when you're forgiving someone of just releasing that tie with them. And then part of it too is just for your own sake of not wanting to deal with, what it was that you were forgiving that person for. Or like if you wanted to stop being like mad at somebody and you forgive them, and then you just move on because you're just tired of being mad at them or you're just ready to be over it.
Yeah, I agree. The forgiveness is more so for someone else. That way you don't hold on to the resentment.
I think it's not more towards someone else. I think it's more of like it's
Oh, did I say the wrong
there's
thing?
like
It's more for yourself, so you don't hold on to the resentment from someone else or what someone else
yeah,
did.
and I also think like, that person benefits from it too. Because like if you're like, if you're mad at someone and you're just like sending out sort of like those mad vibes, people pick up on it.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, we don't have to add any more shit to the collective.
Yeah, in shamanism, that's something that I definitely have been working on building. It's a capacity. Forgiveness is a power that you have. I remember the first initial journeys that I started to do were to go into the strata dimension and to start forgiving people that I needed to forgive in the past and cut cords with them. So I would envision a cord coming from my heart to their heart, and then I would have the spirits that I work with tie the knot, or I would even do it myself, where I would tie the knot and at both ends from my heart and their heart, and then have a spirit come in and then cut the cords, and then bring that cord into my heart, and then forgive them, let go, and then go to this fountain of forgiveness that's in the strata dimension in one of the main halls, and to just drink from that and experience the forgiveness that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool that you could use your imagination to do that and the shamanism. I think whatever helps, because there is kind of like that stickiness that the brain does. Like that like mental process of this thing happened, this thing happened. This person did that. Even
Yeah,
when
I
you
found it's a good way.
forgive, even when you forgive or have the understanding, sometimes the brain like has a tendency to do that, to go back to it.
Yeah, yeah, and I've also found too, like certain things took me many journeys to just work up the complete capacity to just be like, all right, I'm finally going to forgive you for this whole thing. I'm ready. I'm ready for it. I'm ready to stop hating you. Obviously, not you personally.
Yeah, no, no, I get it. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of work with the forgiveness around my dad, and like in the dream, I'm like, I'm still mad. I'm like, ah, all right, I'm still mad. But too, I guess there's, the idea that everything that happened is stored in the body or in the subconscious. So then, that thing and this thing and that, at that age, and then that other thing that like me from 20, 30, 40, 41, 42, where, all the years remembered, so maybe that too has something to do with it. Why there is so much, like the conscious part of us could forgive, but then there could still be unconscious material.
Yeah, and I would also like to add to that, there is that conscious part of us in the past where, we had these traumas. And, the traumas that happened in the past happened. And, then we went on, and sure, more traumas have happened. And they're really acute experiences of life. And, when you do the journeys of forgiveness, like, and you can recall them, like those also happened in the past too. Where it doesn't have to be journey work, it could just be forgiveness in any which way that you find forgiveness and give it. But that also has, a consciousness in the past too, that I think balances out all of what has happened and can be that point to which you go to not get caught up in the stories and go and be in that sort of mental loop.
Mm, I don't know if I necessarily agree that it's a story if a part of my unconscious is holding on to something. Or, like, for example, the other day when I just shared how I had to I forgave myself for a way I treated Lucas, he literally was like, I don't forgive you for whatever we were arguing about. So, in his little, imprinted body, or his little body that gets an imprint, there's like that moment. Maybe, let's say, I don't know exactly, right? I don't think any of us know exactly what's going on. There's some ideas. I don't know if anyone could say with 100% certainty what's actually happening. But, and then sometime in the future, he could forgive me if he felt like he needed to, maybe just an overall forgiveness. But like that event, that feeling left some kind of imprint in him. That's not necessarily a story. He's not telling himself necessarily, oh, my mom was a bitch and this and that. It's literally just like the energy that was in the body. There might not even be a story associated with it. Does that make sense?
Sure, it does make sense. It could also, I think, be both
Oh
in a
yeah.
sense where like the it's the whole thing really. It's the memory and the story of the memory and the sensation that, gives in the body, rest of the body
Yeah, I mean, I
as
don't,
the brain's
yeah.
thinking all those things. And
Yeah, it's all of it. Right. We're not just one thing. Kind of how we talked about with the health, right? Like there's the spiritual, energetic, emotional, physical, all the cells, all the tissues. The body keeps the score. So the book tells us.
the body keeps the score.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily a story.
No, I mean, maybe I was just limiting or being limiting when I was saying it, like just a story. But no, it's not just a story. But I do think there are stories that we tell ourselves of our memories
Oh, of
that,
course.
you know, trigger many things within the body. And, if you can if you can relate to how you relate to the story, sometimes that's definitely a way to, find healing. Like I was saying, just like in an instance where like I've had things happen in the past where people have not been so nice to me and I needed to forgive them, and I forgave them through journey work. And now I'm here telling the story about when I did the journey work. And it's sort of like that mark in time of when I just gave them forgiveness, and the emotion of anger just dissipated after that when it came to like that specific in those specific instances in which I'm talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get what you're saying. Our stories have
Yeah, it's all,
a, huh?
I was about to say it's all really complicated when you have a brain.
It is. Our stories have a lot of meaning to our lives.
They do. They really do. I was also, this is something that I've been contemplating a lot about, is just like instead of telling the stories of all of the traumas that have happened, to tell myself the stories of all of the really awesome stories that have happened. Because I mean, if I look at it throughout a day, I mean, I'm only telling myself a very limited number of like what I'm saying is that the stories only are the stories of the past when I'm thinking about the past in terms of telling myself the story of it. But the whole past, I mean, is the whole thing of the whole past. And I mean, the past is greater than any story of it. Am I clear? Am I being clear? Do you get what I mean?
I think so. I mean, the past was more than just a story. It is everything that happened, not only the negative, but also all the positive moments. And we
Yeah, the
somehow just
past, sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, and we somehow just hold on to like certain ones. I mean, I think even in terms of a day, if you just, at the end of the day, maybe you feel tired and you just kind of reflect. And you don't even reflect on your day, right? You just maybe feel tired, or for me, like maybe the kids were just annoying for an hour, and I could just feel like, ugh. But then if I actually go back in my head and not even think about the story of the day, but literally like this happened, like fact, this happened. I sat on the couch and watched TV with the kids. I made them dinner. It's not necessarily a story. It's more of like this really did happen. Um, yeah, there are moments in there that like, oh wow, that was so cool. I sat on the couch with the kids, like surrounded by both of them, and we watched a show we both liked. And they said mommy. So I think too, even yeah, just reflecting on the past, but in a a much more condensed frame can be helpful
Y-
to point out to yourself, like, wow, that was a moment where I had there was a good part of my day, or that was something to be grateful for, or there was joy in that moment.
I think where you and I were differing is I would have called that your story of the past, like where you were saying you were sitting on the couch and your kids called you mommy. I would have framed that as a story, or
Yeah, I
like
see
if
what
I
you're
was,
saying, but I think of it less as a story. Like that actually did happen. I know what you're saying. Like my story would
not
be
to say
like the
that it didn't
narration of
happen.
it. I think there's a little bit of a difference. I mean, too, like going back to the whole entire like time frame, like that actually happened. Like you and I are actually sitting here talking over Zoom. It's not a fucking story. Like it's really happening.
See, I would disagree though, and I would say that it is a story and it really did happen. And just because something's a story doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Like I mean, all of my past, I'm sure I could put all of my past into it. I don't think I could put it all into a story because it wouldn't all fit into words. But if I could fit all of my past into words, or all of my past that I could fit into words, it would be a story. Just like how, like the story of earlier today, where I was at the job and it was kind of hectic. Like, yeah, that really happened, but it's also really a story.
Well, I think
And there
like
was,
right. So what I think, sorry to interrupt. I think when you're
you're
saying
good.
it was hectic, I feel like that is more of the story. You're describing it. The story is like I think something could just be like a detail. It doesn't necessarily have to be a story. I think there's like things that happen and then there's our interpretation or how we're perceiving that it happened. And for me, I think that's what I think of as more of the story, like our perception of what happened. So I sat on the couch or I made dinner is like it's a fact. If I'm like and I our stories I think they could be factual or they could not be factual. And I think too when we go back the further back we go, the more probably unfactual they become um of how things happened or like how we're recalling it or there's like the emotion involved in it or the emotion that's not involved in it. But I think that I don't know. I guess I think of story as more so our interpretation or perception of something that happened versus like something actually did happen. I don't know. I mean, maybe we just have to agree to disagree on that.
No, that's cool. I mean, you have your own experience of it. I relate to it in the way of when I think about my past, or even if I would relate it to like not even just my past, but like you go to like really deep in the past of when the earth was formed and however it was formed, that's a story. It really happened, and there's really a story of it. Same thing like Big Bang up until now. That's a story that follows a narrative.
I think there's events that happened, and then I think you tell a story about the events.
And the story of the events follows a linear progression, which would be considered the narrative, typically.
Yeah, but like if I'm thinking about something about my day, it doesn't have to necessarily be linear. It's literally like I woke up. Like there doesn't have to be like I could recall it in any way I want. It doesn't have to be a story.
That's the funny thing about linear time, right? Because I mean, like the whole principle of it from what I've explored with it is, we call it linear time, and we typically think about linear time in like one, two, three, four. But if you think about it in terms of, okay, like we're going to tell a story, and this story is taking place in linear time, like when I went on a hike before, like a month ago. So a month ago, I went on a hike, and before I went on the hike, using the word before, referring to before, I made some breakfast. And then after the hike, referring to, I mean, and then I ate some breakfast. And then after breakfast, sorry to get all confusing here. And then after the breakfast, I went and got in my car and drove to the mountain and went on a hike. And then after the hike, it's funny how we use these words because after usually implies after something like into the future, even though we're talking about the past, which was in the past, but it was sort of in the future of this one event in the past of which I'm telling a story of when I went on a hike. And so you see how it's not exactly linear. It doesn't just go like this.
Well, you're using linear time to tell a story about time. And you're using like markers of time.
Yeah, I always find that fascinating to explore that.
Yeah, it gets confusing. Like you're using something to talk about the thing and it's just like twisting on itself, I think.
Yeah, I just think it's like we have very limited words to be able to talk about how things just sort of play out and progress. Of like, oh, I was doing this thing before, but during this thing before, after I got done doing this one thing before, after that,
I think it's also
yeah,
really
it's just an
useful.
interesting use of words.
I think it's
Oh, absolutely. It's
useful.
so useful.
It really helps people to get an understanding. Like if I told you I knew this guy versus like I knew this guy for a minute or I knew this guy for 10 years, like you could have such a better understanding of maybe our relationship or how well I knew him just based on
Yeah, no,
like
I mean, I'm not,
putting one word in there.
yeah, I'm not diminishing, this at all. I think this is fun to explore all of these concepts.
Okay, I didn't think you were diminishing it at all.
Okay, because I didn't want to come off that way.
No, I don't think so. I just think we do disagree about the story. I think there are things that happen. Again, I've already said this. I think there are things that happen, and I think there's like our. All right. I mean, even me telling you, I sat on the couch and watched a TV show. Like that's the perception of what happened. But that's really like as cut and dry as it could get. Right, then the story would be like, I
Right.
loved it so much, and like it was such a bonding moment for me and my kids, and I'm such a good mom, and blah. And that's what I always wanted.
How I relate to story is, and just the whole principle of what a story is it doesn't always have to be, for me, it's something where it's like, it's like this giant thing, like how you normally are presented with a story of like a 200-page book or like an hour and a half long movie. It could just be something as simple as I went to the bathroom earlier. That's me telling the story of how I went to the bathroom earlier now. So like
Yeah.
now I'm here and I'm like, hey, earlier today I went to Wawa and I got a hoagie. That's me now telling you the story about when I went to Wawa and got a hoagie.
Yeah, but there's also facts in there. You're telling like a factual thing.
Right, not all stories are factual. I mean, there's
Yeah, and I
tons of
think that's
stories
where
that are
our
just made
point,
up.
yeah, and I think that's like where our points kind of like come together.
Yes. Yes. It does come together. It's, yeah. I was thinking about it in terms of um, shamanically, how when I place my awareness and I focus on what a story is, and like I was saying, for me earlier, I ate a Wawa hoagie and it was delicious. Well,
Did you
that's me
really eat a
now
Wawa
telling
hoagie?
I really did eat a
Oh,
Wawa hoagie because
what
I had
kind
a
of
free
hoagie did
coupon.
you eat? Oh, my kids have a free
This
coupon.
Yeah, it was a chicken cheesesteak. It was just
Mm.
like the shitty little shit sandwich, but like it kind of hit the spot and it was free, so whatever. It's
You could
yeah,
be
like
gentle
that's
on
the
yourself that
story.
you ate a Wawa hoagie.
Well, I'm not saying like about myself. I mean, I'm fine. I usually eat pretty healthy, so that one Wawa splurge, I'm sure it'll be fine. But I'm saying as far as like the quality of it, Wawa, I love you, but quality was
Mm. Oh, I don't eat hoagies, so I can't speak for Wawa versus anything else.
But so like those are all stories. And then, so I can understand where the confusing part would come in, where you would be, where, all the other things that are considered stories too, like any kind of Disney movie or any kind of movie or ever any kind of like fiction book that was ever written. I mean, those are all stories too.
Yeah, I hear you. Those are stories, made up kind of things. Like if you read a nonfiction book, would you call it a story?
Depends what they're talking about. Give me an example. I've
I
got
don't
one
know.
for
What
you.
about that Qigong book you're reading?
Okay, so the Qigong book, I'd say that there are stories in it, but the information about the Qigong itself isn't a story. It would be a story if they were like, hey, there was this person and they did Qigong for 20 years, or they had cancer and they did Qigong every day for a year and their cancer was treated. That would be the story of that person being treated. But the description of the poses, I wouldn't consider them to be a story. I would consider them to be a description of the poses themselves. And I would consider the stories also to be like any kind of benefit that was reported, even if it was related to science in a very measurable way. That would just be me reading the story of that person who had this very real thing happen to them that benefited them. And then it got reported so that I could then read it in a book of a story about them. Or like for instance, there's this book that I have about a sunken city off the coast of Egypt. And I mean, that's a story in and of itself. There was a sunken city off the coast of Egypt called Thonis Heraklion, and we have been finding artifacts about it or of it, and there's the real evidence of it, all of the artifacts, and then there's the story that gets told about it so that other people know what's going on,
So the artifacts are a
even
story,
though
and the thing you tell about the
I would
artifacts is a story, so they're both story?
I would say that the artifacts themselves are artifacts, but what's written in the book is the story of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
It would be like okay, I got this lion, a little lion figure. And I bought this lion figure at Michael's, right? that's the story of this lion figure. But this lion figure is just the lion figure, and there's a story about how I got it, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still this lion figure. It's the same with the artifacts. Like the artifacts are the artifacts of it. They exist in their own right. And then there's the stories of it that get told to really paint the picture of what happened. Really, and in that case, we don't really know what happened with it, other than there's this like city off of Egypt that seems to have sunk into the ocean.
Hmm. I have to think about it. I still don't necessarily agree with what you're saying. I had to contemplate it a little deeper.
Yeah, the story principle is a fun one to explore
Yeah, I
because
agree.
oftentimes too we relate to story as truth, but the truth about the story is just only a story of it. And how often, we hear stories of stories of stories, right? So like you get people on the news who are telling a story about something that has happened. And then you, not saying you personally, but then you, but just so you're aware, there, you know, then you go out and tell that story to other people. Then that's you telling the story of the story that the people told on the news. Sometimes that person on the news is telling a story about a story, and then people hear it, and then they're going to tell a story about a story about a story. And so, yeah, it gets all really, it's like very, very complicated.
Yeah.
And to like see that as like that, well, that's really the truth of it. In that, in that instance, an example of just like the news and telling stories about something that has happened.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know. I have to kind of sit on this.
Yeah, explore it. I'd like to know what you find out.
All right, well, I'll get back to you. Put a pin in that. Well,
That was a lot of that was a lot of
yeah, I think
a
it
lot of
started with
shamanism.
I think it started with God. Where it all started. Is that a story?
Where it all started. Well, I mean, there's the story of God, and then there's God, and all of it's God. So, I mean,
God's a storyteller. God's a story creator.
the the creator of it all.
Yeah,
It's
there's
funny.
something
I
we
heard
could
this
agree
thing.
on.
Yeah, I heard this thing. I was on this podcast with this one guy that I used to follow, and he, he was saying, he's like, you know, that a lot of people will say that the word of God is the Bible. It's like, well, really the word of God is also the McDonald's menu. I was like, ah, the
Hmm.
guy might be onto something there in his own kind of vulgar way. Because I mean, it's much more than just the McDonald's menu. It's every book that's ever been written by everyone ever.
Yeah, well, I guess depending on how you look at it, right? Whatever
Sure.
story
I
you're
mean,
telling about God.
I would think, God's the thing that's telling all the stories all the time.
Yeah, God plus you.
God plus you, the greatest storyteller that's ever existed.
I guess so. I'm gonna have to get on God and rewrite this, rewrite this story here.
Yeah, it's a really interesting tool, and it's definitely a very healing modality to be able to rework the stories that you tell, and especially too around the future. I mean, oftentimes I'll think about like stories, and it's just sometimes it's subconscious until it becomes conscious of where I'm like telling this story, or it could be like even about something in the past of like I'm telling this story in my head about someone or something being some way that I have zero evidence for. And it turns out like it wasn't that way at all.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty common.
It's very common. And so it's just it's a tool to be able to work with and to, I ask yourself, and I really like to ask myself, like, is this story that I'm telling about this person true in my head? No, no, it's not. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to truth.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing about the brain. Has no idea like what truth is.
Well, I mean, when we're taught to just believe every story that's on the news and trust all of that, I mean, things get all gobbledygooked in the brain. Not to say that there aren't any legit things on the news or the newspaper, but I mean, I'm sure a lot of that shit's probably not true too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's just the news though either.
Right. I mean, gossip. Oh, did you hear this story about this person? I mean, think about how rampant that is. I mean, it was rampant when I was going to school. Oh, did you hear this story about this person? Oh, and then you fall into belief around like, oh, this person did this. They must have did that then. And then you like really believe that story. And then you think like this person is this way because of this story that, you heard when maybe none of that was ever even true. How'd that happen?
Humans telling stories.
Yeah, you know, it's
God
not
telling
easy to have a
stories.
brain.
No, it's not easy to have a brain. It's definitely not. Which is kind of weird. It's like one of our gifts is that we have this brain, but learning how to wield it is a whole nother story.
Yeah. I think learning how to look at all of the coding we've been given and go, okay, this coding actually serves me. Okay, this coding actually doesn't. Delete that and then replace it with new coding that's actually in much better service of you. I found the one thing for me is to, like I said, if I'm thinking something about someone, like, oh, this person, like they really just like they must not like me, or like maybe this person's like mad at me or something, and then I can catch myself thinking all of those things, and then I go, wait, is this really true? Does this person actually think that? Have they come up and have they said this to me? No. Like, maybe they're just having an off day. I don't really know. Maybe they do think all those things, but at the end of the day, if they haven't said it to me, I don't really know. So, like, is it really worth spending all of this, time and mental energy thinking about those things? I think not.
No, definitely not. Yeah, gotta get rid of all those kind of assumptions. They're just a waste of space and a waste of time and effort.
Yeah, yeah. It's the assumption, exactly as you said. And all of the assumptions are based in false conclusions. And so, when we believe our own assumptions and then turns out not to be true, it just creates a lot of personal struggle. Yeah, I mean, in the ceremonial work lately, I've just been working on not fighting the assumptions or delusions, but just sort of like rounding them up and getting them out of my psyche, and just like telling all the spirits that are much greater than myself, that are my guides, to, and just go bring them to their own part of sanctuary. I don't really want them around me anymore. I don't want to be affected by this. Please get it out of my psyche. Help me get this out of my psyche. God, help me get this out of my psyche.
Yeah, yeah. Just have God do all the heavy lifting.
Full circle.
It's like, you put them there, and now you take them out, God. I'm doing the work here. All right. So start with God, end with God. It's all God. Uh,
Thank you,
and
God.
maybe that's a story, or maybe it's not. I don't know. I don't
It's
have a
both.
conclusion yet. Yeah, sure, right? Why does it have to be one or the other? But that's all we have time for today. So thank you, God. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Zoom. Thank you, technology. Thank you to whoever is watching, listening, participating, liking, subscribing, sharing, making a comment. All good. All right. In case I didn't say so, we're ending for today.
Thank you, Melissa.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.